Hey everyone, Albert Lee with Clever Key Consulting Group, and we have another amazing opportunity to talk to my friend, Dr. Andy Garrett, in our ongoing series focused on improving ourselves in the workplace. Today we're going to talk about something that's really important to me as a leader, and that's how to develop resiliency, especially during these tough times. Join us as we explore the ideas of developing resiliency and fostering better working environments for ourselves and for our employees. Whether you are a leader yourself or an individual contributor with aspirations to one day become a leader, we really hope that you get a lot of value out of this. And now, enjoy the video. Hey, Dr. Garrett, thank you so much for spending time with us again in our ongoing video series designed to help us improve in the workplace. And if you guys want to know more about Dr. Garrett's credentials, I'm going to include a link to his website in the video description below. Today, I want to talk about something that's really important to everyone, and that is resiliency. A lot of people in this COVID era have been significantly impacted, and I think resiliency is something that we really need to talk about for everyone. Can you help us out with that?
Absolutely.
Good. Let's start with something general. Dr. Garrett, can you tell us what resiliency is in practical terms?
Absolutely. So resiliency in the most simple terms is really just your ability to bounce back from difficult situations. Bouncing back from hardships, challenges, adversity. For instance, if you lost a job, you'd be demonstrating resilience by quickly trying to learn from whatever happened, in that job loss, and then immediately starting to look for a new job and ideally looking for, an even better opportunity. And so it's really this ability to quickly rebound and kind of get back up when you fall down.
Now, why is it important to develop resilience, and what are the benefits of doing so, and what could be the consequences by not doing so?
Yeah, well, when you lack resilience, really you have kind of an inability, like your self-narrative around what you're capable of doing and who you are is one where you feel like just bad things happen to you and that you're incapable of rebounding from those. So you can probably imagine that could really lead to people feeling stuck. But it really can be worse than that, because when you feel stuck and you don't feel like you're capable of kind of rebounding, it leads to feelings of powerlessness, helplessness, and really it creates kind of a negative feedback loop, where because you don't believe you can do it, you're unlikely to put the extra effort in to persist and to take risks or take challenges. And so you're more likely to stay in bad jobs or bad relationships, or just overall really stay stuck in an overall quality of life that's unfulfilling. It's almost like you take on this passive observer kind of role in your own life, right? Where you feel like life is happening to you as opposed to you directing and kind of being the captain of your own life. And so, played out over a long period of time, this can lead to a really deeply unsatisfying quality of life. Conversely, for people that believe that they are capable, people that have that resilience, they believe that they are capable of overcoming. And that belief, the self-narrative around when bad things happen to me, right, I just pick back up and I always keep pushing forward, it creates a virtuous feedback loop, meaning just that it creates this positive. Because you believe you can overcome challenges, you're more likely to lean into challenges. And that belief fuels you to persist and to keep kind of pushing through. And then you create more confidence, and it just creates an upward cycle where you continue to take on, bigger challenges and take on and kind of grow more and more. And if that process is fueled by kind of an authentic self strategy, right, where what's most important to you, it really is a phenomenal character strength that helps to lead to an overall excellent quality of life. And really it's probably one of the most important character strengths for anybody that wants to thrive in any area of life.
I get that it's important. Can you tell us how we can become resilient, or how we can become better resilient? Also, is it possible to develop resiliency, or is it something that we're born with? And lastly, can you tell us if it's possible to become too resilient?
Yeah, awesome question. So I certainly think, resilience is a character strength ultimately. And as, being a strength, it is something that I believe can be strengthened, practiced, refined, and developed. I do think there probably are some people, that just naturally seem to be more resilient than others. And I think there's some people, and but I do not think that it is a fixed characteristic by any stretch of imagination. And so I think it's important to state that. If you look at really young kids, I think they're an amazing example of just like innate kind of natural resilience. As you look at as they look to master developmental milestones like standing, sitting, crawling, things like that, they immediately pop back up and they just keep pushing forward, trying to pursue mastery of whatever that developmental milestone is. And I think a lot of that comes, one, they're not conscious like
Right.
adults are, but they don't doubt themselves. And so a lot of our resilience is really built around kind of a self-narrative, right? The story we tell ourselves. And as much as I think we'd all love to believe that we're really objective in the way that we see ourselves and see our lives, the research suggests that we're actually pretty biased in the way that we even, interpret our own life experiences.
Okay.
We have certain beliefs or filters that we process our experiences through, and that shapes kind of our identity and the self-narrative that we have. And so the research on resilience shows that really resilient individuals, they're whether they do this, intentionally, or it's something that they develop naturally, or it's something that was modeled to them, however it was done, that they are very careful about how they shape their response to adversity. So instead of feeling, why did this happen to me, and feeling victimized, instead they start to look for what we call an internal locus of control, right? They look for any example of where they can exercise some decision, what they have control over, and then they start to look for ways to develop character strengths, to show courage, to show, whether it's compassion for themselves, some sense of hope of, being able to move forward. And they shape their narrative around that idea, right? That when bad things happen to me, I respond with courage, I respond with tenacity or persistence. And so that's a huge part, I remember I almost did my dissertation on resilience.
Okay.
So spent several months reading about it. And in reading that, I read a lot about individuals who grew up in families where there just was tremendous poverty and violence and really awful circumstances to grow up in. And there were some individuals, some siblings in the family that took the path that is probably the most likely path, right? They followed the example that was set for them.
Okay.
But then there was other individuals that seemed to completely rise above their environment and circumstances. And they just were, really driven, and they were compassionate, and they were kind. And so they studied these individuals. And a lot of it was, that self-narrative. And it was also about having someone in their life that believed in them. The crazy thing with that was it didn't have to be someone that had this huge role in their life, right? It didn't have to be an aunt, an uncle, a father, a grandparent. Sometimes it was someone that they just met one time in their life, right?
Oh, wow.
Someone that came into their life and believed in them, and they felt the sincerity of that belief, and that completely changed their trajectory, right? That self-belief helped them to question their own internal narrative, the way they saw themselves. I think there's a great story from Les Brown, who's a motivational speaker, where he was, I think they use a term that isn't used anymore, but he was in special ed, we'll say that. And so he was told to always set his expectations really low for life, right? That he should aim for remedial jobs, college wasn't for him. And I want to say it was like his junior or senior year of high school where somebody came in as a motivational speaker, and you could tell Les Brown wasn't speaking to him. And I believe the crazier thing too is Les Brown, I believe, was a twin. I think his twin for some reason was the one with high expectation. And I've actually worked with individuals like that too, where identical twins, and one was the cute one and one was the ugly one. So anyways, that always blew my mind. So, but Les Brown, this motivational speaker comes in, and he could tell Les Brown's not, listening to him. And so he asked him, why aren't you paying attention? And he said, well, this isn't for me, right? I know kind of my role and where I'm going. And he questioned Les Brown to say, you're capable of anything you set your mind to. You need to let go of whatever garbage people have told you. And he said that moment was the first time that he ever questioned these labels that had been assigned to him. And he started to think, well, what might I be capable of? And he went on to become, one of the world's greatest inspirational, influential speakers, and has met with presidents and has had an incredible life and very influential life. And so that's obviously an extreme example, But I'm sure most of us can think about. I can think about people in my life that spoke, positive identity into me. They believed in me in a way that helped me to see myself in a better light. And so that's a consistent thing that you tend to see in really resilient people's lives. So I think the challenge for anybody watching this and for myself is, how can I be that person to someone else, right?
Okay.
And so definitely something that can be practiced. I know the last part of that question is that, can there be too much resilience?
Yeah. Is it possible?
And I definitely think there is. I think, the idea of being persistent for persistence sake, I think can be counterproductive. It's like that idea of stubbornness, right? And so if you are consistently trying to push forward on something that clearly is a losing effort, that's probably not the best idea.
Sure.
But it's a fine line, yeah, right? There's amazing stories of people that just refuse to give up. And then, after many times that they should have quit by all, logic, they ended up persisting and having a massive breakthrough towards the end. So it's tough to tell someone when they are being too resilient.
Okay.
But I would say that the marker of that is probably if it's causing damage in your relationships, right? If it's you're losing sleep, your health is suffering, if you're neglecting important areas of your life because you are, pursuing something with such extreme resilience, that's probably a marker that might be a little too much resilience.
Dr. Garrett, can you tell us what the practical implications of being resilient are, especially as it relates to business and work? And if it's possible, can you tell us what that is through a leader's perspective, and then also answer that from the perspective of an individual contributor?
Yeah. If you think about the normal trajectory of success for any business, and really probably in any endeavor, right? It's very rarely, if ever, a straight line, right, towards success. And so really you're looking at, kind of what we call zigzags. So you experience kind of some success, and then maybe there's a plateau, and then sometimes there's setbacks.
Right.
But inevitably there's always a series of challenges and setbacks that you're going to need to overcome in building a successful business. And so if you're the leader, and every time that you have one of those setbacks, that puts you into a catastrophic tailspin, right? And you feel stuck, and everybody has to rally around you to help you, pick you back up. That's going to play a really huge toll on the overall culture and tone of the company. And as the leader, really you're setting the emotional tone for the business and for your employees. And so if you start to get really pessimistic, you start to feel really down, that's going to trickle down to the employees and their overall attitude. And if you have a whole team of people that are doubting themselves, that are feeling like they're not capable of overcoming these challenges, I think it's going to be extremely difficult to have a successful business.
Okay.
On the other hand, if you have a resilient leader, right, someone that really is always ready to bounce back up, they experience a hardship, and the next day you can see, right, that they've got a positive attitude and they've got a can-do attitude, that can be incredibly inspiring for the team that's working with them.
Sure.
And I think if I were a leader and I was amassing or putting together a team, resilience would be one of those character strengths that I would most look for in who I hired and brought on. If I knew that when I experienced hardships and things, the going got tough, I had a team of people that was going to dig their heels in, and they were ready to persist and to overcome any challenges coming their way. I mean, that would light me on fire, right?
Absolutely.
Everybody would have each other's back, and you'd really, see, I think that overall, people elevating, themselves as a byproduct of that culture that's built around resilience. And so, and on the individual side, it's a kind of similar effect that even if you're not setting the emotional tone, just on your individual, your own self-talk and your own psychology, if you know you're the type of person that never gives up, right, that can really instill a lot of confidence. Like I said, earlier, if you know that you won't quit, you're more likely to take risks. And risks are just necessary if you really want to be successful at any type of high level. And if you don't believe that you're capable of overcoming challenges, the likelihood that you'll take those risks, you'll play it safe, right?
Sure.
You're very likely, and that can be a fine path if that's, what's authentic to you or whoever's listening to this. But it certainly is going to set some real limits around what you can achieve. And so I think, developing that resilience on the individual basis is just setting a path for you to have a more fulfilling life and to be more successful.
So do you have any stories that you can share about what resilience looks like in action, especially when it comes to business?
Absolutely. So the story that is very personal to me and the one that stands out, that has always stood out for me as an excellent example of resilience that really has inspired me too, was related to my grandpa. So my grandpa was Carl Karcher and started Carl's Jr. and had a very successful business that was growing, but he had a season of life when I was probably just a young adult, 18, 19 or so. And I mean, he had basically everything around him collapse. So my aunt passed away, unfortunately, of a surgery and unexpected complications due to that. And that was incredibly sad and tragic. My grandpa had open heart surgery. His brother, who was the vice president of the company, passed away of cancer. In the midst of that, they needed to hire someone new, and he was incredibly distracted through his own grief and the things he was going through. And so they brought someone in who was really a terrible hire. This person saw an opportunity, as my grandpa was a little distracted, to try and oust my grandpa to get him out of his own company. And so there was a coup essentially going on during this time that was really stressful. And he had all of this going on within a pretty short period of time. And so, but the crazy thing is as his grandson, I'd go to an Angels game with him or go have dinner with him, and you would never know he was going through any of this. I mean, you asked him how he was doing. He had this trademark. He would always say, "I'm doing great," which I found out later he got that from Mary Kay, the cosmetics person. So, his attitude was incredibly positive, and he believed the whole time that everything was going to work out. He had this incredible faith that things would just work out in some way, right? I don't think he even knew how, and that was in a season of my life where I was really going through a lot and I was really struggling, right? And so seeing my grandpa continue to be a devoted family man, right? Continuing to stay true to his values, continuing to have a really positive attitude amidst all this. Like, I already had a close relationship with him, and he is probably the most influential person in my life. I don't know that he ever influenced me more than in that moment, because I knew what he was going through, and to see him just continue to show up without complaining, without, I think anybody could understand if he felt a little sorry for himself.
Absolutely.
Right? And at least on my end, I didn't see any of that. And so it really helped me to get through some difficult times. I had some tough decisions to make myself about, trying to get my act together, and seeing him, the way that he responded to adversity, it really pushed me over the edge to be able to make some really difficult decisions, to make some big changes in my life. And so, that's a story for me that stands out of someone exercising and demonstrating resilience at a time of incredible adversity. That's the way he was consistently in my experience of him, but to especially see it during that, and then the season that I went through in my life, that's the beauty of resilience, is that it really can be almost contagious, right? When you consistently show up in that way, it's inspiring, and it really can be influential, where the impact of that just spreads.
Dr. Garrett, a lot of our viewers are leaders or soon-to-be leaders. Can you tell us how leaders or business owners can establish resiliency in their working cultures or their working environments?
Yeah, I always love questions around building culture. And so, I think it's really imperative, as on the leadership role, is for them to be really clear on what they value, and how committed they are to exemplifying or demonstrating the very culture that they want to create. For instance, if you had a leader that wanted to create a culture of kindness in their workspace, but then they went around treating everyone terribly, right? It's going to undermine the entire culture, and it's never going to get off the ground, right? So you might have company slogans, you might have words that espouse this idea of kindness, but if leadership themselves is not exemplifying or demonstrating these characteristics, then it really will undermine and create a toxic culture. And so once the leader goes through the process of identifying, right, these are the core values that I really believe in, right, that there's authenticity or congruence between, what I want to, create, and what I want to establish, and what I actually value. And then saying, what type of virtuous impact do I want to have? So virtue is about having positive social impact, and it's about creating kind of a moral, good place to be in. And then what character strengths would go along with those that would really help to, create an overall culture. So they got to start from that place of kind of first getting really clear on, these layers of culture establishment. Once they've done that, right, then I would say it's all about hiring people very selectively. So if you know that you want to create, say, a culture of resilience, right, then I would be looking for character strengths like grit, determination, resilience itself,
right.
Optimism, right? There's a few character strengths that we know that tend to be highly correlated with resilience that I would be looking for. And I would make sure also that the values that you are, highlighting that are built around resilience, if that's the culture you're setting, right, that it has to match. If you have someone who just doesn't value some of the things that are most important to the work culture and establishing resilience, you're going to also undermine the whole process. You're going to create friction, right? It's like you are trying to create a stream, right, that's working towards a resilient culture, and you have someone that's like actively working against that or defying that. And so, selecting very carefully and very intentionally who you hire on is so critical and so important in establishing culture. Assuming that you've got that part nailed down, I would say from there, you really want to start to create even like company stories, right? So whether it's the leader, establishing a story of resilience that they had in creating the company or someone in their life. And so it becomes almost this like folklore, right? Of, our leader is so resilient and this is an example of that.
Right.
It helps to create an identity, right? People can look to that story and it inspires them to want to rise up to that level as well. You see this example like with Nordstrom's, in their legendary customer service.
Yeah.
There's a story of, I think early in the company, where someone brought a tire to one of their stores, right? And from what I understand, I've asked a few, I enjoy going to Nordstrom's myself, but I've asked the store clerks there, like, do you guys know that story? And they're like, everyone knows that story.
Right.
And so, it does a really nice job of creating, kind of a culture that people want to rise up, to create their own version of that story. And then you have little maxims or slogans that you tell, right? All these things are built just to reinforce the culture. I would have training opportunities that are very intentionally designed to help instill resilience, whether that's bringing in, a consultant or somebody to, that comes in. But there are wonderful exercises that you can do that help to shape self-narrative. There's things that you can do that are fun, right? Team building exercises, but that are also designed to help build resilience. So I would make sure that that is a consistent part of the overall like training experience of the company, if resilience is really important to you, right? And so you just have a series like there. It's a very strategic, intentional process of saying, this is the culture we want to create, right? And this is how it's going to be instilled. We make sure that we identify or recognize people in times when they're being resilient, and we reinforce that positively by rewarding them. For people that are showing a lack of resilience or undermining resilience, right? We make sure that that doesn't get rewarded, and it gets course corrected. And
understood.
If someone's consistently undermining resilience, and then there's probably a course of action that needs to take. And so, just that consistency of seeing how it shows up in multiple phases is really, I think, how you do an incredible job of establishing a culture around a character strength or kind of a virtue.
So, Dr. Garrett, we actually have some questions from some viewers that we'd want to ask you about the subject. If you don't mind, would that be okay with you?
Yeah, bring it on.
Okay. First one is, as a leader, how can my resiliency or lack thereof inspire or hurt my employees?
Yeah. Well, I think as we alluded to a little bit earlier, that as the leader, you really are setting the emotional tone for the overall company and employees. It reminds me a little bit of kind of the parenting maxim that, your kids are much more watching what you do than what you say. And so, you're modeling for them what you're expecting. And so if you're telling your kids not to, be on the internet all day, but then you're on the internet all day, right? They're much more attuned to that. And so same thing for the resilient leader, right? Who does, I think, an exemplary job of really continuing to have a positive attitude, continues to, push forward and rebound from difficult moments really well, that inspires and it sets the example, and, really helps everybody that's working with the leader to want to kind of rise up to that level. Now, for the non-resilient leader, someone who maybe is complaining a lot, who throws a fit every time that things don't go well, who's easily kind of gives up or quits, if that person is then asking everybody working, with them to be resilient when they're clearly not demonstrating that, it's going to be very apparent, and the employees are not only going to be non-inspired, but it's going to feel really unfair. You're asking me to be positive. You're asking me to push through difficult times. You're asking me to find this extra gear at work, right? But yet, you're undermining that very process. And so that's where you can really quickly start to get, people complaining, starting to really feel, it creates toxicity, right? When leadership is not practicing what they preach, it just creates a sense of injustice, right? That's not fair. How can they ask me to do that when they themselves are not only not doing it, but they create a vibe around everyone else that makes us want to quit.
Okay, Dr. Garrett. Here's one from an individual's contributor's perspective. I've recently been let go from my job due to COVID, and there are hardly any job openings for what I do. How do I get over this depression and move forward?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and something that I certainly am hearing from a number of people, so I think very relevant right now. And I think it's important to start from a place of acknowledging your feelings and accepting them. I think we can sometimes have this tendency when we feel bad to think that we shouldn't feel this way, to wish our feelings away, or to kind of reject the feeling, and then you only just start to feel bad about feeling bad, right? So your bad feelings compound, and it just exacerbates or worsens kind of the depression or feeling down. And so, but when we can come to a place of accepting and acknowledging, our feelings, and we even know if we can specifically name the feelings, it helps us to feel more objective about our feelings. So instead of feeling in the subjective feeling and kind of just feeling stuck in it, it helps us almost to be mindful, where we're observing ourselves feeling a certain way, which then allows us to take more corrective action, right? And so accepting the feelings loosens our rigid attachment to the feeling, and then that allows us to kind of pivot to take action. And so once people are in a place where they're ready to take some type of forward action, I think it's really important to have some type of framework to process these feelings through. One of the frameworks that I often use with my clients, it's kind of a version of what they call a benefit finding exercise, where you start to think about what happened, right? What do I have control over? It develops again that internal locus of control. That's really, really important in overcoming difficult moments and adversity. It's really important in overcoming depression, right? Depression very much is this experience of feeling helpless and powerless to a large extent, right? That's a huge part of depression. And so the ability to start to recognize, here's what I have the ability to take action on, and then here's a plan of action on what I'm gonna do with that, can really be empowering. And so certainly people sometimes get stuck on the idea of I didn't have any control over getting fired, right? And so usually what you have control over is how you choose to respond to what happened and your attitude, right? So if you're having difficulty acknowledging what you might have control over, that's two good areas to start in. And then from there, I would suggest looking at what happened in the firing and wherever you're at now in the job, and what can you learn from what you experience? Is there anything that you can apply that might be beneficial for you in the whole process? And is there a character strength that you could develop as you are looking to get that next job? Is it resilience, right? Is it patience? Is it self-compassion? That gives you a place to transfer your energy that turns into something meaningful, right? Okay. So that is important in this process. Once you've done that, I think it's just a matter then of kind of, again, having a strategy and making sure that you're consistently applying, some type of action, and then evaluating how did that action go, right? Did it have positive benefits? Is it a plan of action for how to apply to jobs? Is it, how to take good self-care, right? Is it exercising and making sure you're getting decent sleep, whatever it might be, but that you are putting together some type of forward action on how to create the life or the, new experience of you that you want to have. And so I think that's really, and then the last piece of the benefit finding exercise is if there is a way to apply what you've learned or the character strength that you've developed that could be beneficial for someone else, right? That, if you become more patient, maybe that benefits your spouse, maybe that benefits, your friends or whoever. Or maybe you've learned a lesson in the process, right? Maybe that you realized, hey, I was at a job that there was a terrible values fit. And so now I recognize how important it is to find a job that's a great values fit, right? And maybe then you can use that to help other people who are looking for jobs, or who knows, maybe you decide to become a job coach, right? Or something like that. Maybe your experience allows you to make a pivot into a new career that is, really much more exciting and that you're more intrinsically motivated for. And then being able to use that to benefit, that kind of completes the process of taking, something kind of, awful that happened to you, something that you didn't want to happen, and it transfers these kind of negative feelings that can really keep you stuck. And it helps it to kind of place it into some type of meaningful growth and purpose. So I like there as an Einstein quote, and I'm terrible at verbatim quotes, but something along the lines that like once energy is in motion, it can be neither destroyed nor created. It needs to be transformed, something along those lines, right? And I think the same thing when we have a negative emotion, right? Depression, sadness, anger, especially something that really is pervasive, something that's that doesn't go away. I think that feeling, it needs some type of outlet to be transformed into something positive. And if you don't, right? If you just try to avoid it, if you just, try and keep yourself busy, things like that, the feeling will just linger. It'll just keep sticking around, and oftentimes it'll just get worse. And so hopefully this is one outlet that you could use to be able to process those feelings and turn it into something meaningful.
Okay, Dr. Garrett, here's another one. Running a business during the COVID era has been extremely tough. I've lost half of my customers, and I don't know when I will ever get back to full strength. I'm losing money every day. How do I know if I should throw in the towel or if I should keep pushing forward?
Yeah, it's obviously a really important question. And of course, without knowing any specifics around your business, this person's business, it's hard to give specific information or guidance on that. But in a general sense, right, I think it's important to have trusted people around you in making such a big and significant decision, right? To make sure you have a board of advisors, whether it's an actual board of advisors or whether that's just, people that know you, that know your business, that know business, and that they can give you objective feedback that you, again, really trust, and it takes into consideration the implications of that decision, all the people that will be impacted by making that decision. In regards to how this relates to resilience, I think one of the things that can be tough in making that decision is that our businesses are so personal to us, right? And so sometimes it's tough to see things objectively when, something is so important to us. And so I think, again, that probably really just highlights the necessity and significance of having that board of advisors. But I do think it's an opportunity, right, that wherever this person's at, is to look at, where can I pivot? What can I do to make sure that I'm not just, running on a treadmill, staying stuck, kind of trying to apply and do the same things, and it's not moving the needle anywhere. Might you need to get a little more lean in your cost? Is there a way to pivot some of your business, again, without knowing the specifics, but is there a way to move online or have e-commerce? Like, is there a way to pivot what you're doing, right, that could create streams of revenue? And that would be exercising resilience, right? And so I think the more that they can really take a very careful audit of what's working and what's not, and really start to take forward action on implementing, a new course of action that takes into consideration, business in the COVID era. And I've seen this happen for a number of people where, their initial, experience of COVID, they saw a massive hit in their revenue. Yeah. And so the first couple of months, they're panicking. Once they were able to calm down and really start to take, kind of get feedback and to look at where they could pivot, some of those same individuals are thriving now, right? In fact, they're making more income than they did pre-COVID.
Wow.
So I know it's not the case for everyone.
Yeah.
But there's opportunities out there, but it's really important to maintain what I'd say is emotional agility, right? That when you start to get too fearful, and uncertainty overtakes you, right, then you become very rigid in your thinking. And it's very difficult to see outside this kind of bubble of fear that you're in. But if you can stay calm and you can, start to formulate, kind of ideas and thoughts and start exercising your creativity, right? Start remembering what really matters most and what's, your core kind of strengths and values. That will help you to become more emotionally flexible and then more cognitively flexible. So you're thinking, right? You'll be able to start accessing some of that creativity, the innovation that is necessary to make it through a time like this.
Dr. Garrett, if you're ready for another one, we have another one. And it is, I feel that I've been resilient for a long time and I'm not seeing the results as soon as I'd like. Is there anything I can do to practice self-care while building my resiliency?
Yeah, another great question. I find this question to be uniquely significant or challenging, I think, sometimes for entrepreneurs and for certainly business leaders, people that, whether they're type A's, but they're really driven and they put a lot of pressure on themselves. And so, there's almost this sense of belief. I remember putting this one time on a post on social media, and I got a bunch of people who I know to be business owners and leaders that responded to this. But it was about when you go through something difficult, and there's almost like this faulty sense of that in order to learn from mistakes or when things are going tough, it's like I need to be harder on myself. I need to be more critical of myself because that's how I hold myself accountable, and that's how I'm gonna rise above, right? Is by holding my feet to the fire. And the research shows that actually is a terrible way to instill resilience or to overcome when you're really feeling stuck or difficult times. That a much more effective way is to exercise self-compassion, right? So the more that you can choose to be kind to yourself, you can choose to be self-loving and forgiving and those things. Now, it's not suggesting that you don't learn from mistake. It's not suggesting that you don't be accountable for whatever it is that's going on in your life. But it just certainly suggests the significance of exercising really good self-care. And I think self-compassion is, in general, just kind of difficult. I don't think we as humans often do the greatest job of that. And I think especially for people that are really driven, I think that it can be particularly challenging. So, but if you want to learn from past mistakes, if you want to grow and get through difficult times, self-compassion is really important. And I like the idea of thinking of, we really have a relationship with ourselves, right? So almost like treating ourselves as a best friend, right? We often say things to ourselves in our inner self-talk that we would never say to a friend, right? And so I think just being more careful about using encouraging language, right? About choosing to be kind in difficult moments instead of berating yourself or telling yourself what a dummy you are or something like that, right? Is I think really important. And then there's the self-care on like a physical standpoint of like making sure that during difficult times that you're really being aware and conscious of your sleeping patterns, right? Are you exercising? Are you eating healthy foods?
All right.
Right. And it's really easy during stressful times. Like we just stop doing the very things that, are really important and help us to be at our best.
Yeah.
And we tend to isolate. It's I think the other thing that during difficult times we sometimes stop accessing resources that are really important to us. And there's crazy research about how stress impacts us when we feel isolated versus when we reach out to support. So when we feel stressed and we are isolated, feel alone, it actually changes how the cardiovascular impact of stress in our heart. So it's much better. I'll just say it's much better for you to make sure that you are reaching out to people you trust and to surround yourself with support and care during those times, and your heart will thank you for doing that.
Dr. Garrett, if you don't mind, we have one more question from one of our viewers. It is, I've experienced a lot of failure, so much so that I expect it as almost the likely outcome. How can I shift my perspective from being a failure to someone who is going through a rough patch?
As I hear that question, I believe that the question that they're asking there is, how do they shift their identity, right? It's how do I go from seeing myself as the type of person that fails to creating a new identity, hopefully one that's, is much more positive or optimistic. And our identity is huge in regards to how it impacts our overall quality of life. There's a saying that inner clarity equals outer results, right? So when you really know who you are and you really have an identity that you've chosen, that it naturally then creates the outward experiences and results that you want in life. And so, but changing identity is totally doable, but certainly can be challenging. With our identity, the tough thing is that like we seek to be in alignment with whatever we believe about ourselves, right? So if we believe we're the type of person that fails, we almost like look for evidence to support this conclusion we've already come to, right? So if we're scanning our environment, we are highly attuned to the things in our environment that are consistent with that belief. And we tend to delete evidence that is inconsistent with that. They've replicated this on numerous studies on confirmation bias and a variety of other social psychology constructs. So this happens, like this definitely happens. People that are lucky tend to more consistently just find information that is consistent with that. So, I think one, acknowledging that identity is something that can shift, right? That this idea that you see yourself as a failure, that it's fixed is just not something that needs to continue to be. But once you've identified like this is, I acknowledge this is, what I believe. I think it's important to, one, come to a place of self-acceptance that helps to loosen that rigid attachment to that identity, right? Creates you again some more of that flexibility in the cognitive, so that you can start to then pivot into, well, what identity might I want to establish, right? So, and I think people would be surprised to recognize that you really can choose your identity, and then you really can. There's a great story that I heard from an Oprah interview with Lady Gaga. And to be honest with you, I don't know much about Lady Gaga, but the story was really inspiring, and I think it applies very much to what we're talking about here, where she, I believe, was unfortunately, I think, traumatized as a younger woman, and as she was kind of rising up in her singing career, she had to get up on stage, and she often felt ill-equipped, right, to get up on stage and to project confidence, and the person she needed to be isn't who she felt on the inside. She had a very different internalized identity. And so she created Lady Gaga, that identity, as an alter ego, right? And she built it around that Lady Gaga was supposed to be courageous and brave and bold and creative. So she really figured out that this is who I want to become. And she built it. I don't know if she had a coach working with her on this, that she just figured out on her own, but it was really brilliant because she developed it about her intrinsic qualities, right? About these character strengths that she wanted to be. And I'm sure those things that are important to her, what she values. And so then when she'd get on stage, she would just exemplify, she would demonstrate these character strengths. And the more she did that, at some point, the alter ego and who she was just merged, right? She just became the courageous, bold, confident person. And what I think is kind of fascinating, the story that I heard on the interview, is that some of the, kind of radical behaviors that she was known for, like the meat suits and things like that, she actually stopped doing those because she didn't feel, that she needed to grab attention that way. She felt comfortable within herself that her music could just speak for itself, right? So she kind of found internal peace that way. And so, taking that example and then saying here, I would say, what is the identity and how could you build it around character strengths, intrinsic qualities that you have more control over, right? And, and there's great assessments that can help you to identify what your signature character strengths are. How do you identify the values that are consistent with that? Like if you're choosing an identity that is not aligned with your core values, it's just not going to stick, right?
Sure.
But if you align these things, these intrinsic qualities, these intrinsic characteristics about yourself with this new identity that you want to have, not only is it a quicker way to transform your identity, but it's the way to create a sustainable change where your identity is essentially in internal harmony. And so, I don't know what that identity for this president, they want to see themselves as the type of person that's resilient and always sees things through to, success or completion. I'd be careful not to make the identity about the outcome, right? If you say that I'm always a winner, or I'm the type of person that always makes tons of money or something like that, I think those are kind of extrinsic qualities. And we know from research that even if you are super confident that you can make those extrinsic, kind of motivators a reality, it's not going to create the life experience that you think it is. And it's more likely that you're going to still feel very anxious, insecure, and people that are extrinsically motivated tend to be perceived as more selfish and very angry. And so, but again, when you create this internal identity around these intrinsic qualities, that's the way to really create sustainable change, and one that's going to be deeply fulfilling and lead to, I think, a quality of life that they're going to be very happy with.
Wow, Dr. Garrett, that was a lot of information, and I know we can talk a lot more about this subject, but if there was anything that you would want our viewers to take away from this, what would that be?
You know, if I had to pick a character strength, you know, if there was like a hierarchy or if there was a competition, right, gladiator style of character strengths for a moment, you know, they're all amazing. But if I had to pick one, I'd pick authenticity, because that's just where you really develop character strength that's most true to who you are. Right?
Sure.
So it's kind of like a catch-all. But if I had to pick a second one, right, if I was team captain and I was picking the second, you know, I think resilience would be right there at the top, because it's so critical, not only to success, but to really, you know, any area of life. You know, there's a concept of growth mindset, and, you know, it's really just another way of kind of framing resilience. There's this idea of grit that's become really popular, and really it's kind of another term for resilience.
Yeah.
You know, but the ability to just not give up and to continue to push forward, to rebound quickly, right? And to continue to have a positive attitude, to continue to have hope, is so crucial to success in marriage, to success in family, to success, you know, in business. If I think about, you know, a lot of my successes in life, you know, it's really a story of resilience. And I think even at grad school, you know, does it take intelligence to get to grad school? Yeah, right. But really, the people that finished, I feel it's a certificate in resilience more than anything else.
Sure.
Right? A lot of people quit just because it's so demanding and it's so stressful. And one of the things I learned about myself in grad school, despite, you know, the classes I took, was that I don't give up. Right? There were times that grad school was tough. It was really demanding. I had a lot of stuff go on in my personal life that made it difficult for seasons, for semesters. But I didn't give up. Dissertation was terrible. I did not enjoy writing that at all, right? But I never gave up. And so if you know that you're the type of person that just refuses to give up, and you know that you're willing to make some occasional adjustments, right? That you're willing to learn from mistakes, you're going to just, by natural process of living for a while, right? You're going to run into some considerable success and progress.
Sure.
By you know, taking on that character strength or characteristic. And so resilience is so significant. And so for anybody watching this, right, I would, if you feel like this is a character strength that you want to develop and you want to get stronger at, I'd highly encourage you to pursue that. If that's something I can help out with, I'm happy to do so. There's great resources for that. If there's, you know, there's other great resources too that we can certainly point people to. But
good.
I'd strongly encourage people, you know, the culture of resilience. I mean, I think that is huge too. So I'd strongly encourage people to pursue developing their resilience and to make that a lifelong quest.
Hey everyone, I hope you leaders and soon-to-be leaders got some value out of this. And if you did, please help us out by hitting the like button and even sharing it so we can get this information out to more people. If you'd like to know more about us at Clever Key Consulting Group or Dr. Garrett at AG Thrive, we will include our website information in the video description below. If you guys have any questions or comments, please comment in the section below, and we'll try to get responses out to you. If you guys have any suggested topics on what you want us to talk about, please also comment below, and we'd love to do a video on that topic just for you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next video.